Recently, I have been covering 25 Pokemon secrets that you may not know about from every Pokemon region, and today it's time to cover secrets from the Sinnoh-based Pokemon games. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start things off by looking at the most recent iteration of Sinnoh introduced in Pokemon Legends Arceus. As you may know, this game is absolutely packed with secrets, and one of them might actually hint towards Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which hadn't quite been announced yet at the time of this game's release. The three starter Pokemon of this game that eventually evolve into their Hisuian forms have secondary typings that are identical to the secondary typings of the Paldea starters. Decidueye is part fighting type, and so is Quaquaval, and they're also both birds, so that's interesting. Both Typhlosion and Skeledirge are fire ghost type, and Samurott is part dark type, just like Meowscarada. Another thing that I thought was interesting that connects Sinnoh and Paldea isn't really a hint and is more like a coincidence more than anything else, but it's a pretty big coincidence too, which makes it worth pointing out. In the movie The Rise of Darkrai, the main setting is a place called Alamos Town, which is actually based on Barcelona, Spain, and the space-time towers in the town are based on the Sagrada Familia, which are what Mesa Goza and the Naranja/Uva Academy are based on in Scarlet and Violet. And of course, the Sinnoh remakes and Legends Arceus were what were released directly before Scarlet and Violet was announced, which is pretty wild in my opinion, even if it is just a coincidence. Yet another thing that's crazy about Legends Arceus are all of the characters in the game that are the ancestors of other characters. One character in particular, though, seems to legitimately be the ancestor of two characters, meaning that those two characters are actually related to each other. Gayrick is a warden of the Pearl Clan who seems to be an ancestor of both Wolfrick from Pokemon X and Y and Crasher Wake from Diamond and Pearl. Not only is he the warden of Avalugg, who is Wolfrick's signature Pokemon, but the two look very similar to one another, having very similar facial features, the same hairstyle, and even the same habit of having a coat, but not exactly wearing it properly even though they're both found in cold areas. However, he also has a very similar style of beard to Crasher Wake, is obviously in Sinnoh, where Crasher Wake is also from, and he's shirtless, which is another signature character trait of Crasher Wake as well. All of this seems to imply that Gayrick could be the ancestor to both of these characters, meaning that despite having no prior association to each other whatsoever, Wolfrick and Crasher Wake could actually be related to one another, which is pretty insane. Speaking of things from Legends Arceus that are kind of insane, the shoes of Irida, the leader of the Pearl Clan, actually resemble Pokeballs. However, it's not the current, more primitive Pokeball design that they resemble, it's the modern-day Pokeball design, which makes this not only a cool little secret part of her design, but it also begs a huge question of how they could resemble the modern Pokeball if the modern Pokeball doesn't even exist during this time period. There's more cool stuff going on with Sinnoh, though, than just Legends Arceus. Like, for example, in Sunyshore City in the original Diamond and Pearl, there is a large rock formation sitting in the water that resembles a Munchlax, but in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, it resembles a Snorlax, which is an excellent nod to these games being remakes. Another thing that's different about the remakes compared to the original games is that the game corner in Veilstone City has been replaced by the Metronome Style Shop. This was obviously done because there can't be any gambling elements in Pokemon games anymore without them being given a higher rating. But the Metronome Style Shop is still acting as an homage to the game corner nevertheless, as it gets its name, the Metronome Style Shop, from the game corner itself, as Clefairy was a sort of mascot of the game corner in the original games, and that was the case because Veilstone City is known to have had meteorites fall within the city, which you can see for yourself in the southeastern part of town. Meanwhile, something that's very ironic in Sinnoh is that Hearthome City, one of the most notable locations in the entire Sinnoh region, likely gets its name from the phrase, "Home is where the heart is." However, Hearthome City's gym leader Fantina isn't even from Sinnoh, and is explicitly stated to be from some other region far away. With that said though, you could also look at this as a nod to Fantina as well, and how she is notable as a character because her home is in fact outside of the Sinnoh region. Another funny thing about one of Sinnoh's gym leaders has to do with Candice. So Candice is the 7th gym leader of her region, is an ice-type leader, resides in a city that is close to a lake, and is ironically underdressed for the weather despite specializing in the ice type. Weirdly enough, all of these traits are actually shared with 2 other ice-type gym leaders, Price and Byron. Both are 7th gym leaders in their regions and use ice types. Price in the original Gold and Silver was not dressed for winter weather at all, and Mahogany Town sits right next to the Lake of Rage. Bryson, on the other hand, may have a wintry kimono on, but he's also wearing capris and half of his torso is completely exposed, so he's not exactly bundled up either. And while there isn't technically a full-on lake next to Isserus City where he is located, there is the Moor of Isserus, which is a very similar location, and therefore connects all of these gym leaders together in just about the strangest way possible. Next, let's get into another fun category that I like to cover in these videos: beta content. As with basically all of the earlier Pokemon games, Diamond and Pearl recently have had a lot of their early beta content leaked, which has allowed us an unprecedented glimpse at what was going on during the development of these games. One thing in particular that these leaks showed us was a beta sprite of Arceus, which looks nothing like its final design. However, it does look strikingly similar to another mythical Pokemon, and that would be Marshadow. Despite these 2 Pokemon having no connection whatsoever, and Marshadow not even being a thing until about a decade after Diamond and Pearl were released, it looks shockingly similar to this beta sprite of Arceus. From the wispy, ghostly body, to the color, to the large, wide-open, oval-shaped, reddish-colored eyes, these 2 share so many distinct traits with one another that it seems unlikely that it's just a coincidence. However, that then brings up a ton of questions about what this could mean if it is in fact not a coincidence, since, as I said, these Pokemon have no relation to each other whatsoever in the final games, making this one of the most interesting Pokemon mysteries in recent memory. Another cool yet simple thing about these leaks is that it revealed that the Ace trainers of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl once had a completely different design to the ones they have in the final games. They did, however, retain a similar pose. Additionally, as an ongoing part of all these leaks that have occurred in recent years, beta names of Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup have also been discovered. According to the leaks, Turtwig was originally going to be known as Sprouttle at one point, Chimchar was going to be known as Scorchimp, and Piplup was going to be known as Plupil. You definitely dodged a bullet there, Piplup. We don't get to see beta content on Pokemon names all that often, so this is a super fascinating look into the creative process that goes into giving all of the Pokemon we know and love the actual names that we know them by. Another beta-esque element involving Gen 4 concerns Pokemon Platinum, and how it's actually possible that Platinum was going to be the name of Pokemon Crystal originally. This is because in February of 1999, the frequently asked questions section of Pokemon.com actually mentioned Pokemon Platinum when asking if certain games like Gold, Silver, and others would eventually be released in North America. Considering that Gold and Silver were the next big games at the time, and Platinum is the next natural step up from Silver and Gold, it actually makes all the sense in the world for Crystal version to be named Platinum instead, which adds to the possibility that this could be the case. However, since this is circa February of 1999, before Gold and Silver had even released, which they would do in November of that same year, and as such, this is well before Crystal was a thing, it does call into question a little bit if this could actually be the case. But otherwise, everything seems to line up here quite well, meaning that the name Platinum could have at least been under consideration possibly as the name for the third Gen 2 title, before Crystal was ultimately used instead. With that said though, let's go back and look at some more stuff from Legends Arceus. The professor who gives you your starter in this game is of course Professor Lavington, and thanks to his British accent, it's pretty easy to deduce that he is originally from the Galar region. However, if you had any doubt if this was actually the case, then a neat little secret about him might help to convince you, as on the chalkboard that is in his lab, writing can be seen that actually features characters from the Galarian alphabet, pretty definitively confirming that he is in fact from the Galar region. But if you're really stubborn and still aren't convinced, then this should definitely do the trick, as Lavington has another secret about him that reveals his Galarian roots. His pants, of all things, are actually a direct reference to the fact that he is the ancestor of Leon and Hop, as his pants are the same exact colors and feature the same pinstripes as Leon's jersey, making for a pretty clear connection between the two characters and showing that not only is Lavington from Galar, but he's also the great-great-great-granddaddy of Hop and Leon as well. While not a Sinnoh Pokemon itself, Nosepass is a Pokemon that appears in Legends Arceus, as it evolves into the Sinnoh Pokemon Probopass. And in true Legends Arceus fashion, there is even a neat little attention to detail going on with it, too. As when you find Nosepass in the wild, unless it's attacking you, its nose will always be pointing north, just like a compass, which, like I said, is just a great attention to detail. And as if Legends couldn't get cool enough, it even has fan-made content in it too. While you may know that the Pokemon Kricketune is synonymous with its cry, dele dele whoop, which has since become a meme, you may not know that the actual phonetic interpretation of the sound that Kricketune is making was actually created by a fan. A YouTube user by the name of Senor Pac-Man uploaded a video on October 5th, 2013, where he explored what it would be like if a Pokemon's cry was their actual name. And for Kricketune, he came up with the iconic Dele Dele Whoop. Despite being iconic, this wasn't actually an official thing until Pokemon Legends Arceus, where the Delelele Whoop cry was actually included in the game and canonized forever, not only making it a part of Pokemon lore, but also meaning that it's a piece of fan-made content that actually made it into an official game. And from fan-made content in the game to content that crosses canons, there's even something in Legends Arceus from Pokemon Battle Revolution, which was a Gen 4 spin-off title. In the game, there is a character named Cindy, who is actually the female player character, and in her default design, she is seen wearing a hat with an emblem on it that seems to be the combination of a flower and a Pokeball. And this emblem actually ended up getting used in Legends Arceus as the official emblem of the Survey Corps, which is the corps that you participate in as the player. This just goes to show that there is basically no part of the Pokemon franchise whatsoever that Legends didn't want to make reference to, which is absolutely incredible. Two Sinnoh Pokemon that you're able to obtain in Legends through various means are the mythical and legendary Shaman and Giratina, and these two actually starred in a movie together called Giratina and the Sky Warrior. Now, I don't know about you, but I always thought that it was kind of funny that they paired these two up in a movie, because they have no real connections to each other whatsoever, and aren't really related in any way at all outside of both being from the Sinnoh region. Well, if you have ever noticed this like I have, then I am happy to report that there seemingly is an actual reason why these two actually make sense to put in a movie together, and it's because they represent heaven and hell. It's pretty easy to see that Giratina is basically a representation of the devil, and therefore it represents hell, but what makes this connection so hard to make out in the first place is how Shaman actually represents heaven in its design. Shaman's name most likely comes from, in part, the word Shamayim, which is the Hebrew word for heaven. This is not only because it is very similar in spelling to the name Shaman, but also because Shaman also has an additional form that is known as its Sky form, which otherwise is pretty random for a hedgehog Pokemon, but correlates quite perfectly with this heavenly part of its name, which makes it all the more likely as a legitimate inspiration and would explain why this very unlikely duo was featured together in the 11th Pokemon movie. Something else that's interesting about Sinnoh Pokemon in general is that a ton of them have clothes integrated into their designs. Most of the time, people absolutely hate when Pokemon are seen wearing clothes, so it's ironic that clothes are a super significant part of the designs of many Sinnoh Pokemon, which by and large are Pokemon that are beloved by the fanbase. For example, you've got Roserade, who is wearing a mask, Vespiquen, who is depicted as if it's wearing a dress, Haunchcrow, whose feathers are in the shape of a hat, Chatot, who is wearing a big, fluffy, feathery collar, Lucario, whose legs are designed as if it's wearing shorts, and so on. There are even more Sinnoh Pokemon outside of this who fall into this category as well, which I thought was kind of interesting given how much people hate Pokemon who wear clothes, but also generally enjoy all of these Pokemon. Another Pokemon that could technically fall into this category as well is Piplup, as it has some interesting elements subtly hidden into its design that honestly make its design all the better. On the surface, it's just a cute little penguin, but if you look closely, you'll see that it actually has a pattern in the shape of a crown above its beak, alluding to its eventual evolution into the emperor-like Empoleon. Additionally though, this theme is continued even more in Piplup's design as well, as if you take a close look at the darker blue color of its head that then extends down onto its shoulders and back, you can see that it actually resembles the shape of a chainmail helmet, or some other kinds of medieval headwear as well, which further implies how this Pokemon is going to evolve into a more royally themed design, and as such, this current first stage is naturally depicted as more of a knave or commoner. It's an absolutely genius part of Piplup's design that never gets talked about because it's a cute penguin, but in my opinion, it makes Piplup's design 10 times better. One subtle but kind of crazy thing about the Sinnoh games is that in Pokemon Platinum, virtually everything about Celestic Town is different compared to the way that it was in Diamond and Pearl. All of the buildings other than the Pokemon Center are different, which is pretty easy to see, but pretty much everything else is different too, even though it's a lot more subtle. The trees that appear in the town are different, the flowers are different, the trails are slightly different, which you can see in their edges, and even the pattern of the grass is different too, showing that Game Freak essentially rebuilt Celestic Town from the ground up for Pokemon Platinum, which is a kind of change that doesn't typically happen in the upgraded versions like Platinum or Emerald, as most of the elements from those previous games will largely remain the same in these upgraded versions, so I thought that this particular case was a pretty interesting detail. Another notable city in Sinnoh is Jubalife City, and it's notable for not only being Sinnoh's biggest city, but also for not having a gym even though it is such a big city. However, this was not always the case, as it seems almost definitive, based on unused data within the games, that Jubalife City was planned to have a gym at one point, because not only is there an unused map within the game for Jubalife City that uses the gym music as its background music, but there is also unused text that mentions Jubalife City's gym leader as well. And while that's pretty crazy on its own, I actually have an idea about what this gym could have been as well. This part is completely speculative, but I believe that Jubalife City could have played host to the Steel-type gym that is headed by Byron in Candice City, as not only would the Steel-type fit the modern big city aesthetic of Jubalife, but as the 6th gym, it would have also kept up the tradition of putting late-game gyms in early-game towns, like we saw in Gens 1 and 3. Finally, it would have also given you a proper reason to return to Jubalife and this area of the map as you eventually made your way further west to check out Candice City and Iron Island, which would have made for some pretty good pacing as far as the game is concerned. So while that part of this is just an idea and like I said is pure speculation, it does seem to fit together pretty well in my opinion. And speaking of Jubalife City and cut content, this is also the place where you get the Pokétch as well. And wouldn't you know it, there were also some Pokétch apps that didn't make it into the games either. There's a stopwatch app and an alarm clock app that are functional but unobtainable within the games. It is thought that these apps could have been planned to be distributed via an event, but that those events never ended up happening for whatever reason, hence why they go unused. Further adding to the cut content of the Sinnoh games is the fact that it even seems like there were some characters cut from the games as well. One set of noteworthy characters that feature in Diamond and Pearl are the stat trainers. Trainers like Cheryl and Riley who you have to help navigate a certain area of the map and who specialize in Pokemon with certain stats, such as those with high HP or attack. There are 5 of these characters in total, including Cheryl and Riley, as well as Mira, Buck, and Marley. However, in the data of the games, the sprites of these characters are named 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, 7-4, and 7-5, and are followed by 2 placeholder sprites, all but confirming that 2 more of these stat trainers were planned to be included, but were cut from the games for some reason. If these characters had been included, one of them would have likely specialized in defense or special defense, since Buck specializes in both of these, while every other trainer only specializes in one particular stat. However, since there are only 6 major stats in the games, it's unclear what the 7th character would have specialized in. They could have possibly been the leader of the group, so to speak, and excelled in all of the stats, or they could have possibly excelled in one of the in-battle stats instead, like evasion or accuracy. Hopefully someday we'll be able to find out more about this and who these characters actually were, because this is definitely a super interesting situation. You can't really talk about Sinnoh though without mentioning the post-game battle zone. This place consists of the fight area, the resort area, and the survival area. And the fight area in particular got a bit of a makeover from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum, with the addition of the Battle Frontier. One of the smaller changes that this resulted in was the sprite of the attendants in the battle tower, who look different between the games. However, there is a moment in Pokemon Platinum while choosing a partner for a multi-battle where the attendant will actually change their appearance and revert back to what they originally looked like in Diamond and Pearl, which was most likely an oversight on the part of the developers. And those were 25 Sinnoh secrets that you may have not known about. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and let me know all your thoughts in the comments because it really helps the video out. Also, if you would like to support the channel further, be sure to check out my Pokemon remixes on Spotify, as well as other music streaming services. Listening there greatly supports the channel right back here, and is greatly appreciated. With that said, I'll be back very soon with another video, and until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.